All right, welcome back. We're here for another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today's episode, we're going to cover a lot of just recruiting. That's what we're focusing on. This is being aired on March, the end of February. You can see Brandon's new sign that he has added. He says Brum and Hose equal dumb. He's a genius, so congratulate him. It took him about 3 tries to spell it out, so it was you could read it on your screen. But anyways, so today's episode, we're going to cover all the recruiting leading up into this weekend, March 5th. There's going to be a ton of kids visiting. We're going to release another video on March 1st regarding about 5 or 6 kids that will be visiting that we know of. And I mean, that's just the initial start. But this one, we're going to talk about Lebbeus Overton, Micaiah Overton, David Hicks, T.A. Cunningham, and Caleb Downs, all superstars in their 2023 and 2024 class, all on the defensive side of the ball, and updates on all of them, because I feel like this is all these kids are high priorities for the Sooners and are going to be big players down the road, and some kids that OU needs to get. But before we get into it, we just want to say we really appreciate it. We've been slowing down on our videos, but I'll tell you what, March, we are going to pick it up. There's going to be a lot of recruiting, not only this coming weekend, but the third weekend of March. I believe it's the 25th. There's going to be a ton of kids. We've got a lot of videos talking about who's going to be there and the results and maybe some possible commitments after. So be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Facebook. Everything's all at Two Plane Sports. It'll all be linked below in the description. And if you don't want to listen to us or don't want to see us, actually not, you definitely want to listen to us. But if you don't want to see us, go follow us on there on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So the first 2 guys we're going to talk about, I feel like by the title, you guys probably are clicking on this video because you're very interested in Lebbeus Overton and Micaiah Overton. Lebbeus is 6'5", 265-pound defensive lineman out of Alpharetta, Georgia. He was once the 2023 class. He was the number 1 defensive lineman in there, number 3, number 4, depending on who you looked at, player in that class. He's since reclassified to the 2022. He's a 5-star, number 18 overall, number 5 defensive lineman. And his brother Micaiah entered the transfer portal. He was from Liberty, once a tight end who has become a defensive lineman himself. Both OU legacies, with their fathers being Milton Overton. And they have locked in 3 visits: Oregon, Georgia, Texas A&M. Oregon will be on March 11th, Georgia March 18th, Texas A&M March 25th. So they've locked in 3 visits. OU and Ohio State have not gotten their visits locked in just yet. But I will say, I do think OU will get a visit. I think they're aiming to be the last visit to leave the lasting impression. And I think that's a smart move. Now you are gambling a little bit, letting some other teams, maybe get into his ear earlier and talk to him, and maybe he gets blown away by the Oregon visit. I will say OU and Oregon are the only 2 schools out of those 5 who have also offered Micaiah Overton. And I feel like that's a big deal. Brandon, do you want to, give us your opinion on those 2 and where you see them going?
So Micaiah Overton, in my opinion, we've discussed this in the past on the show, kind of to me just feels like a guy who, although he has great size, and I think he could be somebody you can develop, he's getting this offer because he's riding the coattails of his brother, which is a smart move for him, not only because he's going to get to play at a good university, wherever he ends up going, but he'll also get the opportunity, he'll get trained, coached by higher level coaches than at Liberty. All this, it makes sense for him. But Lebbeus Overton is a freak, and this is a kid that we should. I mean, we are prioritizing, and we should try everything in our power to get him. I do have one question for you guys, though. I'm looking at his stat sheet right now, and this is according to 24/7. 2019, 105 tackles, 42 tackles for loss, 19 sacks. 2020, 70 tackles, 38 tackles for loss, 21 and a half sacks. 2021, 54 tackles, 16 and a half tackles for loss, and 7.5 sacks. Why is there such a drop in production in 21 versus the last 2 years? Did they just figure him out and start doubling and tripling him? Or what's the – but, I mean, according to 24, I mean, his his career numbers are 229 tackles, 96 and a half for loss, and 48 sacks. So, yeah, he's that kind of guy, and that's the kind of kid we're bringing in and trying to recruit, or we are recruiting, but trying to, get him to commit to Oklahoma, and it would be fantastic. But why that huge dip in 21 compared to 20 and 19?
We probably have to watch a lot of his games, figure out what I'm sure people were figuring him out and trying to double him or pretty much put all 5 offensive linemen on him to make sure he doesn't get to the backfield. But also, just once you get older, especially when you're a recruit of that caliber, we probably saw it when we were in school. I remember one of the guys that was graduating with me, he had already signed with Oklahoma State, and he didn't play any of his senior year. I'm not saying that Lebbeus did the same thing, but it's possible that they were just backing off so that he can just train and stay healthy for moving on to the next level. But I agree with you about Micaiah. It's going to be interesting to see if it's actually going to be a package deal overall. I don't think Lebbeus should be hell-bent on playing with his brother. I think that's Micaiah's intention, not Lebbeus's. And it's going to be unfortunate if Lebbeus ends up committing to one of the schools that Micaiah doesn't have an offer from, because then he'll kind of be left behind. And I don't know if Oklahoma and Oregon are going to want to keep those offers available to a guy that it seems like they're really just offering to get the more talented younger brother on campus and potentially on the team.
No, see, you might be right as far as it's like with Lebbeus specifically, he might not factor the decision entirely on the ability to play with his brother. But as Brum mentioned, if only Oklahoma and Oregon are offering that, I hope it stays put that way, because at the end of the day, if that's not his number one driving factor, if Oklahoma and Oregon are the only schools that offer that, I do think it will help in the long run, because, I mean, it is kind of neat to be able to play with your brother. And if only those 2 schools offer it, that might give us just another leg up.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Lanning, Oregon's getting this visit because of Dan Lanning being, with the Bulldogs for the last few years and has built a great relationship. That's pretty much the only reason they're getting a visit, and because they, have that prior relationship. But I mean, the thing is, you think about Texas A&M, as much as we don't care for them, what they pulled in this 2021 class is insane along the defensive line. The depth is going to be ridiculous, and it's going to be hard. I mean, I'm not saying that Lebbeus couldn't start, because he probably would.
The class they bought. Oh, is that what you're talking about?
Yes. And then you think of Georgia. Georgia's defensive line is ridiculous. Ohio State's defensive line is ridiculous. Oregon and Oklahoma, while their defensive lines are good, they've lost some pieces. Kayvon Thibodeau's going to the NFL. OU Perion Winfrey's gone. Nick Bonino. I mean, I know he's a linebacker, but I feel like the 2 schools that are offer the least path of resistance to play for not only Lebbeus, but for Micaiah. And I do feel like it doesn't matter if you pick one of the 5 schools, you're going to have great defensive line coaching and a great defensive coordinator and great defensive mind. And I think OU provides, even better than Dan Lanning with Todd Bates and Venables and Roof. So, and there's a scholarship at Oklahoma. But then you think about it, I know OU is going to roll out a great NIL deal for probably both of them, or at least one of them. And while Texas A&M and Georgia could just say, well, we'll give you a preferred walk-on for Micaiah, we'll package up a great, NIL deal, Micaiah might realize, like, dude, this is going to be ridiculous for me to start. And then, they're both OU legacies, and they might just think, well, we can go to Oklahoma, we can both compete for time, we'll both get NIL deals, and we'll both have great defensive coaching. Why wouldn't we go play? I know I'm biased, but I just feel like their dad played for Oklahoma. There just has to be some sort of draw. And I really think OU is going to set up to where they're going to be the last visit, whether it's the first or second weekend in April. I know the deadline to sign is April 15th to be a part of this 2022 class. So we will know a decision quickly. I just think OU is trying to wait and see where Ohio State's going to end up being as far as a visit date, if it happens, which it might not. I don't know.
Well, I think overall there's there still should be some sort of worry that a date hasn't been nailed down because he's had a month to figure all this stuff out, and Oklahoma wasn't a priority. I mean, we're seeing all these players coming this weekend, and like you said, the third weekend of March. You know, he only has so much time to visit these schools and talk to these coaches to make a decision. So there should be a little bit of worry there. I feel like we shouldn't be that confident in the fact that just because we have an offer out for his brother as well. On the other hand, I think that the relationship with Todd Bates is overall will help Oklahoma land him if he does want to be at Oklahoma and ends up at Oklahoma. It be because of Todd and for no other reason other than him, in my opinion. Just because that dude not only developed talent, but has shown that he can recruit at the highest level against the best of them at that position group. So he's definitely gonna do what it takes. In regards to NIL, I mean, I know that a lot of players are starting to get money before they even do anything in the college level. We saw Quinn Ewers get the $1 million before, and that's why he reclassified. We're seeing Caleb Williams get a shit ton of money after his first year of college. I think while it's gonna happen, most of these kids aren't going to get these loaded deals coming out of high school. We're probably going to see them maybe get like $100K, and that's still a lot of money. I'm not saying that's something to pretend like it's not, but they might not even get that much. I really do not think NIL is going to play that big of a factor into anyone's decision unless they absolutely need the dollars. And it doesn't seem like the Overton family is hard pressed for money at the moment. So it's really going to be fit and where he believes he's going to progress for the next level.
So I just have a couple things to say about Hose's last point, because I agree with you in regards of Todd Bates probably being the number one factor if we were to land him. I definitely think that's the case, because as you mentioned, I'm not disagreeing there either. He's a great developer of talent. He's a great recruiter. He's the guy that can bring in this type of talent to your team. So I do agree Todd Bates would be the number one reason that he comes to Oklahoma if we land him. But you said that it would kind of be the only reason, and that's where I disagree, because at the end of the day, these kids were probably both Sooner born, Sooner bred. And just being on campus is going to be a neat feeling for them to be like, hey, man, like, Dad played here. This is kind of cool. And I think that's going to factor into it for us. I think we have Todd Bates. We have his dad playing there, the legacy effect, which may not factor in a whole lot, but it's definitely going to factor in a little bit. And the fact that Micaiah Overton could possibly play at Oklahoma, where he's not going to play, and Oregon too, but he's not going to play at the other schools. I think all three of those things would factor into the decision if they decide Oklahoma. And also with NIL, I'm going to disagree with you on that, because Texas A&M got 7 5-stars. They've never done that in the history of the world until NIL. That's not a coincidence.
Here's the thing. I didn't say that it doesn't factor in for anyone. It depends on the person's situation, what they value. And from the outside perspective, looking in, the Overtons aren't really looking to see who the highest bidder is. If it comes down, it's not like Caleb Williams, right? Where it seemed like it was, well, USC is offering me potentially $5 million with NIL deals if I commit there, or UCLA isn't willing to go 5.5 or something. That doesn't seem like it's the situation right now. Maybe like if there's ever a point where he wants to transfer, that could be the case after he's actually made a name for himself. But coming out of high school, I don't believe that many people will, again, depending on the situation, we won't see that many kids get a lot of money unless they're quarterbacks. And unfortunately, that's just not the position they play. I think most schools, if they're going to offer anything, it'll be like, oh, you'll get access to like a car dealership because these kids need transportation. You'll get access to signing. Oklahoma is one of the few schools that will have jersey sales with their names on it, and that'll help them out. So there's these little things, right? But I don't think we're going to expect to see $500,000, millions of dollars being thrown at these kids that aren't quarterbacks specifically, and even quarterbacks themselves, coming out of high school.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. It's going to be interesting to watch. I would hope to see, a couple, Oklahoma get their visit on the books here pretty soon for the first weekend of April. Tough to say exactly when that would come out, but I do expect it to happen. And if OU ends up being the final visit, and it stands that OU and Oregon are the only two schools that offer Micaiah a full ride scholarship, I really like the way the Sooners are positioning themselves. Not saying it's for sure, um, but I feel like Bates and Venables are really doing their job and are going to really make it hard for the Overtons to say no. So, that was a long discussion. I mean, rightfully so. Lebbeus is a generational talent and someone that OU needs to get and would be huge to land. And by far the biggest recruit that Venables would have in his short tenure so far. So continuing on the defensive side, David Hicks, we've talked about him multiple times. I feel like we've been talking about him since last summer, and he's a 6'4", 250-pound defensive lineman out of Allen, Texas. 2023 5-star, number 4 overall player, number 1 defensive lineman in the 2023 class. So we go from the number 5 defensive lineman in 2022 to the number 1 defensive lineman in 2023. Hicks visited OU in January, and he is set to visit Miami this coming weekend, and he will be visiting OU and A&M one of the weekends in March, just depending on his track schedule, because it's like every weekend this year, or not this year, but this time of year. And he plans on visiting the Oregon spring game. Again, I think it's the Dan Lanning effect, and he is, with his SEC ties, it's going to pay off for this class and the 2024 class. But I feel like whenever we get past that, we get 2025 and 2026, when he's in the Pacific Northwest, it's going to be harder for him to pull kids out of Texas and the southeastern United States. But David Hicks will be back on campus sometime in March. I'd imagine it might be the weekend of the 25th. I think this is going to be his 3rd or 4th visit, and that's impressive. A&M will be getting their 3rd or 4th visit as well. I think OU and A&M are the clear-cut number 1 and number 2. I don't know which one's number 1, number 2. My gut says A&M, just because I'm trying to be realistic. But Jose, what do you think about getting Hicks back on campus and the outlook on him?
I think it's big time that he's coming back on campus because, like you said, it's not his first or second time coming to campus. He's been a reoccurring visitor. But it'll be good to have him now that, I don't know, is this his first time visiting under Venables with the Venables staff? I can't remember.
No, he came the last weekend of January, so Venables was here.
Okay, so I mean, and that's even better. The gap is very small there, and he pretty much is taking the first opportunity he can when it comes to visiting schools for football to go to Oklahoma. So the last time he visited any school was OU, and the first time he's revisiting another school is OU. I feel like that speaks big to where he wants to go. And who knows, A&M might be the front runner, like you said, but the fact that he's making the effort to go to OU is important, and it shows that he is actually very interested in playing for Todd Bates. Again, I think we've said it every time we talk about an interior defensive lineman. Todd Bates is going to be the reason that this defensive line is going to be monstrous moving forward. And recruiting and the way that they play, developing players, I think that's something that we're going to see a big change in for Oklahoma moving forward. We're actually going to see potentially maybe even guys like Micaiah, who aren't really talked about. No one really ever thought about until Lebbeus was potentially up for grabs as well. Like we're going to see development out of these guys. We're actually going to see them look like pro level players, not just really good players. And then they go to the Senior Bowl and look like monsters like Perrion. So I'm happy that DJ is coming back, and hopefully he has a good visit number 2 with this staff so that he can just commit later on. Probably I would assume sometime during the summer or early fall is when he would want to do so. It seems like he's one of the guys that's going to be an early enrollee wherever he does go.
Yeah, so we had a show weeks ago about Lebbeus Overton, and we all put our predictions out there as far as where he's going to land. I think Host had a 2020, 2020. You also, like me, Brum, favored A&M, but gave Oklahoma a pretty good chance, and you had a dark horse in there. I agree with you on Hicks. I think A&M, again, is going to head, just like with Overton, I think they hold a slight advantage, but it's not to say that Oklahoma's not legitimately in the running. And as Hose just mentioned, this kid is taking the quickest possible opportunity to get back on campus, which clearly means the Todd Bates effect, the Venables effect, is a real thing. I know we constantly reiterate it, but it's because it's real, and it just keeps showing up that it's real. Hicks is an intriguing prospect to me because, similar to Lebbeus as well, with his size, he's a little smaller than Lebbeus at 6'4", 250. So with Hicks, I think he's a guy who can play anywhere. He can get to campus and they can decide to bulk him up and put him at D tackle, or he can get to campus with that 6'4", 250 size, and he can play edge, and they can kind of get him, body wise, perfect to play that edge spot. Through 2 seasons of high school football, he has 34 tackles for loss and 18 sacks. Again, very, very efficient, and a great body type, great athleticism, a guy that you can do a lot of things with. Lebbeus, Overton, and Hicks would be 2 huge gets, and I think probably the most important gets outside of Josh Connolly in Seattle.
Yeah. So, I'm excited getting Hicks back on campus. I'd imagine, he might come again in June, because I think OU, while they're going to probably change it up a little bit, I do think they're going to have a barbecue type event. And that's going to be something that they're going to have, whether it's exactly a barbecue, I don't know. I'd imagine Hicks will come up again at least once this summer, and we'll see an official visit this fall, I'd guess. So he's probably on the books for a visit in March, and I'm guessing probably 2 more before he commits, or maybe 1 more and then he commits, and then an official visit to OU as a committed sooner. I don't know, but he's going to Miami. This is his 2nd visit, and I think Miami might be 3rd in this race, but it's really going to come down to OU and A&M. So moving on to the next guy, I mean, we've talked about Lebbeus, Overton, stud defensive lineman. David Hicks, number 1 defensive lineman in the 2023 class. We're going to roll right into the 2024 class. We're going to have to start really talking about these 2024 kids. It's hard to believe, but we're turning the page. 2022 class is basically done. This one is T.A. Cunningham, 6'6", 265-pound defensive lineman out of Alpharetta, Georgia. That might sound familiar because Lebbeus is from Alpharetta, Georgia, and they're friends. They don't go to the same high school, but they're really close. He's a 2024. He's a 5-star, number 7 overall, number 1 defensive lineman in the class. So, I mean, he's extremely talented. Granted, he just finished his sophomore year. He has a great relationship with Todd Bates, and I believe that relationship started while Bates was at Clemson. Most schools are recruiting him as an interior defensive lineman, but OU wants him to be able to kind of move around and play a lot of the DN, kind of what Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy was going to be. But for whatever reason, this staff didn't see Brownlow-Dindy as that, in that role, but they see Cunningham there. It seems like Chavis and him are developing a great relationship, and he recently tweeted out, "I heart Oklahoma," and tagged Miguel Chavis, and that was this past weekend. I mean, take that for what it's worth, but he's showing some love. I mean, he's just a sophomore, going in his junior year. I mean, we're years away, at least a year away, probably before he commits. But I mean, the fact that he's got some interest, and I there's nothing been reported, but I feel like OU might be able to get him on campus for the March 25th, 26th weekend. I don't know for sure, but I feel like they're pushing for him, and it would be huge to get him on campus. So, I mean, we're talking top talent along the defensive line in the 2022, 23, and 24 class that are really loving Oklahoma. And that is huge, and I think it speaks to this coaching staff. Brandon, what do you think about Cunningham and the outlook? I mean, we're going to be talking about him for over a year, but just the fact that he's showing this much interest this early.
Yeah, no, he's as you just mentioned, he's a guy that is going to be brought up on this show a lot in the coming years, just because he is so young. As a 2024 prospect, he's going to be somebody that's going to be high on our radar for a long time. We actually had tweeted about T.A. Cunningham from our Twitter account, which if you don't follow, again, please follow 2Plane Sports on Twitter. Put a lot of good stuff out there. But we tweeted about T.A. Cunningham, and we actually got a response, and somebody said, I'll talk about this kid on the next podcast. Can't wait to hear what Brandon has to say. Bro, I know you know what I'm talking about. We brought it up, yeah. So with T.A. Cunningham, he is the guy that my favorite defensive end of all time, first ballot Hall of Famer, Jason Taylor, was 6'6", 265, 6'6", 270. That's exactly what T.A. Cunningham is. So essentially what I'm going to say in this podcast tonight is he is the next Jason Taylor, because it only makes sense. It only makes sense. He's the same size. I mean, it's to a T almost the same size. And Jason Taylor is obviously a first ballot Hall of Famer. So I think Oklahoma should land him, and then he becomes Jason Taylor, and we win. So Twitter user who commented to us, there it is. T.A. Cunningham equals Jason Taylor. I'll put it on the message board one of these times.
Well, hopefully you're right. I'm not going to take that leap like you just did, because he is just 16 years old and he's got a lot
Jason
of time.
Taylor was 16 years old too once.
No, we were all 16 years old once, but we don't know what he's going to be. I think it does. He is obviously very talented. It's strange to me why schools are wanting him to be exclusively an interior defensive lineman when in high school he did play all around the line, and it seemed like watching his highlights, he mainly did play defensive end. He's very good at it. He can push kids around. Obviously, he's very big, so his size helps in high school. But at this point, he's playing against older kids still, much older kids sometimes. So he's got the talent. He really just, we're gonna have to see what he develops into over the next couple of years, because it's hard for me to say he's gonna be the next Jason Taylor potentially.
7 sacks, 22 tackles for loss, 9 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles last year. As you mentioned, as a 16-year-old going against higher level competition, he's the next Jason Taylor. I'm just bold to say it now.
Yeah, well, that Twitter comment came from Brian Smith. So rather than just call him Twitter user, so
we love you, baby.
Yeah, so I do agree. I mean, I think he's got a very high level, high ceiling. I mean, to think that he just finished up his sophomore year and he's already 6'6", 265, it's kind of insane. I couldn't imagine being 16 years old and being that size. So someone
I'm gonna get there one day, but just obviously not at 16.
You might tip in at 265 one of these days. You'll be nice and round, but I don't know about the height. So anyway, we'll go ahead and move on to the last guy. We're going to talk about another defensive stud is Caleb Downs, 6 foot, 185-pound safety out of Houston, Georgia. I believe it's Houston, Georgia. 2023 5-star, number 11 overall, number 1 safety in the class. He's going to be visiting the Sooners the weekend of March 25th. And he's got a great relationship with Venables and Valai, because, they started recruiting him while they were at Georgia and Alabama, respectively. And I just get the feeling that Georgia's going to be hard to beat. I feel like going into Georgia is hard. I mean, we've talked about Lebbeus Overton. He's from Georgia. Cunningham's from Georgia. I think OU can pull him out now. I didn't have much faith, with the last coaching staff, but if any staff was going to be able to pull these kids out of the state of Georgia and beat the Bulldogs in a recruitment for a defensive player, it would be this one. Downs is a freak, great safety, and has an extremely high ceiling. Jose, what do you think?
So I'm watching his highlights now. I'm rewatching him, and I'm a big fan of his ball skills on the defensive side of the ball. He has instincts to just break as soon as he sees that ball. Just the tip of the quarterback's finger is he's releasing the football, and that kid knows where that football is going to be. And it's really impressive. It looks like he played wide receiver in high school, which isn't a surprise. Most really talented players play on both sides of the ball, and he was a good receiver. So hopefully he does that relationship with Venables and Valai turn for the best, and he becomes a Sooner. But if he is a safety, he's going to have to start creating a relationship with Coach Hall. And I think Hall's done a great job. To me, he is the most proven in regards to development with the secondary. I've said it multiple times, Valai is still up in the air, but Hall knows what he's doing with the safeties. Hopefully he can prove to Caleb that that he will become a great college safety and be ready for the pros by the time he's done at Oklahoma. And but I do think you're right. It is going to be hard to go into Georgia and take defensive talent. They have really good defenses, and it's going to be hard to prove otherwise at this point. We just got to show them after a year with this staff that this is the right place to be for anyone that wants to play on the defensive side of the ball. But his recruitment's going to be one that we're definitely going to be talking about over the next 6 to 8 months. Just depends on when he decides to commit.
Yeah, no, I'm going to piggyback off Jose and just absolutely agree, because Jose mentioned his ball skills and his just ability to read a quarterback's eyes and break on it right away. Through 2 seasons of high school football, at least two seasons where he recorded stats, he's got 22 pass breakups and 9 picks at a safety spot. And to pair with that over 100 tackles, he's at 109. So he's very instinctual, great size, great speed. I kind of agree with you guys where it's going to be hard to pull kids out of Georgia, especially if the Bulldogs do want him, and as you mentioned, they do. But I mean, there's no reason that he can't have a very incredible career under Brent Venables. And I think we're right in there with any high level defensive recruit because of Brent Venables and company. So yeah, there's a good chance he ends up as a Sooner, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are all the guys we're going to talk about in this show. Just a quick recap. I mean, we have to think about what we're talking about. We're talking about every single kid we covered: Overton, Hicks, Cunningham, and Downs are all 5 stars in their respective classes on the defensive side of the ball. If you would have asked me that 5 years ago that these kids would even be considering and visiting, I would have told you you're insane. This is, OU's coming back on the defensive side of the ball, and it's just the start. So it's impressive. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we do Brandon's in a video challenge as he's sipping on a cold Miller Lite? Brandon?
No, you brought it up right there. So again, I think we had a good show tonight. A lot of fun defensive recruits. I totally agree. And again, as Toby mentioned, we are going to be able to land these 4- and 5-star defensive recruits because we do have a fantastic defensive mind head coach now, which is exciting, and it's gonna help us as we move into the future. We've already discussed that a bunch of times. A bunch of really high quality kids that we talked about tonight. Very excited about all of them. Hopefully they all become Sooners. That's what we all hope for, and everybody watching hopes for. So, unrelated, I am drinking Miller Lite tonight. What's your favorite light beer?
All right. Let us know which one's your favorite, or even if it's not even a light beer. What type of beer is your favorite? I mean, I don't know. I feel
Do you make it the end video questions?
I feel like there's gonna be a lot of people
that's fine. Whatever beer you like, I guess. Come with your favorite beer.
I feel like there's gonna be a lot of people that like various other things beer wise too. So, but anyway, if you made it this far, hit the like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. We've got a lot of good stuff, a lot of recruiting coming up in March, and April is going to be busy too with the spring game and more visits coming. And then before you know it, we're going to be in summer ball. Be sure to stick around, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Everything's at 2 Plane Sports, link down below. And we'll catch you next time.